The animatronic stalker. It was supposed to be a fun day. The Carter family had been planning their trip to Chuck E. Cheese for weeks. 8-year-old Tommy was especially excited. He loved pizza, arcade games, and the animatronic characters that sang on stage. When they arrived, the place was packed with kids laughing and running around. Bright lights flashed from the game machines, and the smell of fresh pizza filled the air. Tommy's parents, Sarah and Mark, found a table near the stage where the animatronics performed. There was Chuck E. Cheese, the friendly mouse, Helen Henny, the singing chicken, Mr. Munch, the big purple monster, Jasper T. Jowls, the country dog, and Pasquale, the pizza-making chef. Tommy ran off to play while Sarah and Mark ordered food. He spent most of his time at the skee-ball machine, rolling the wooden balls up the ramp to win tickets. He wanted to get a big prize at the counter before they left. While playing, Tommy noticed something strange. Every time he looked toward the stage, one of the animatronics seemed to be looking at him. It was Jasper T. Jowls, the dog with a cowboy hat and a guitar. At first, Tommy thought it was just part of the show. The animatronics moved in a programmed way, their heads turning and mouths opening as they sang. But when the music stopped and the show ended, Jasper's head was still slightly turned toward him. Tommy rubbed his eyes. Maybe he was imagining things. He went back to playing, but every time he looked up, Jasper seemed to be staring at him. Even when the other animatronics were moving normally, Jasper's eyes followed him. He told his mom, but she laughed. "It's just a robot, honey. Maybe it's broken." Tommy wasn't so sure. The more he watched, the more convinced he became that something was wrong. He tested it by moving around the room. No matter where he went, Jasper's eyes seemed to follow. Even when he ducked behind a table, he felt like he was still being watched. When the next show started, Jasper's movements looked slower than usual, almost as if he was struggling. The other animatronics danced and played their instruments as normal, but Jasper's head turned just a little too far, almost like he was trying to see beyond the stage. Tommy's stomach felt uneasy. After eating their pizza, Sarah and Mark let Tommy play a little longer while they sat at the table. Tommy kept watching Jasper, and then he saw something that made his heart race. The show had ended, the music had stopped, and the animatronics were supposed to be still. But Jasper's eyes moved, just slightly, but enough for Tommy to see. They weren't following the usual robotic pattern. They were tracking him. His parents still didn't believe him, so Tommy decided to get closer. He walked up to the stage, looking at Jasper carefully. Up close, the animatronic looked old. Its fur was faded, and some of the plastic around its eyes was cracked. It smelled strange, like dust and old wires. Tommy reached out, just to see if he was being silly. Before he could touch it, Jasper's mouth opened, just a little, just enough to make Tommy jump back. He ran to his parents, heart pounding. "Mom! Dad! It moved!" he cried. Sarah sighed. "Sweetie, it's just a machine. Let's not bother it." Mark chuckled. "Maybe we should head home. It's getting late." Tommy didn't want to stay any longer, so he agreed. As they gathered their things, Tommy took one last look at the stage. The animatronics stood still. The restaurant was closing soon, and most of the other kids had left. The music was off, and the lights were dimming. Then, just as they were walking out the door, Tommy glanced back. Jasper's head had moved again. This time, it was turned completely toward him. Tommy grabbed his mom's hand. "Mom, it moved again." Sarah sighed. "Come on, let's go, honey." Mark laughed. You've got a great imagination, kiddo. Tommy didn't want to argue, but he knew what he saw. As they walked to the car, he felt an uneasy sensation, like something was still watching him. That night, Tommy had trouble sleeping. He kept thinking about Jasper. What if it wasn't just a glitch? What if the animatronic had really moved? He tossed and turned, trying to shake the feeling of those eyes following him. Then, around midnight, there was a noise outside his window. It was soft, like a light tapping. At first, Tommy thought it was just the wind. But then he heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. His heart pounded. He slowly turned to look at the window. There, just barely visible in the dim light, were two glowing eyes staring in. The hidden room. Jack had been working the night shift at Manny's Diner for about 3 months. It wasn't a bad job. The customers were mostly quiet. The work wasn't too hard, and he liked the peaceful hours when the city was asleep. The only downside was that sometimes, working alone late at night gave him a weird feeling, like someone was watching him. But he always shook it off as just being tired. One night, around 2 a.m., Jack was cleaning up the kitchen. He had just finished washing a pile of dishes when he noticed something strange. At the back of the kitchen, behind a shelf of canned goods, there was a door. He had never seen it before. That was odd. He had been working here for months and never noticed a door there. He stepped closer and rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe he was imagining things. The door was old and wooden, with a rusty metal handle. It didn't have a sign or anything that said where it led. Jack hesitated. He should probably just ignore it, finish his shift, and go home. But curiosity got the best of him. He grabbed the handle and gave it a slow turn. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow hallway. Jack pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The hallway was small, just wide enough for one person to walk through. The walls were made of bricks, old and cracked. It smelled like dust and something else, something Jack couldn't quite place. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. As he walked down the hallway, he noticed old posters peeling off the walls. They looked like advertisements for arcade games, the kind from the 1980s. Jack had always liked retro games, so he found them interesting. But why would there be posters like this in the back of a diner? It didn't make sense. At the end of the hallway, he found another door. This one was different. It was metal and had a small, square window near the top. Jack peeked through the window, but it was too dark to see anything. He hesitated again, but something inside him pushed him forward. He reached for the handle and pulled the door open. Inside, the air felt heavy, almost like the room had been sealed for a long time. But what really caught Jack's attention were the arcade machines. Rows of them lined the walls, their screens glowing dimly in the darkness. The machines were old, covered in dust, but somehow they were still running. The soft hum of electricity filled the room, even though Jack couldn't see any power cords plugged in. Jack stepped closer to one of the machines. The game on the screen was one he had never seen before. The title was just a blinking question mark. That was strange. He pressed a button, and the game started on its own. The screen showed a pixelated character walking through a hallway, much like the one Jack had just passed through. His stomach tightened. That was too weird. Then, the laughter started. It was soft at first, barely more than a whisper. A low chuckle that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Jack spun around, but he was alone. The machines kept glowing. The game on the screen kept playing, and the laughter grew louder. Jack's heart pounded. He stepped back, bumping into another machine. This one flickered to life, and on the screen, he saw himself. It was a grainy, pixelated version of him, standing in the same room, looking just as scared as he felt. Then, the figure on the screen turned its head, something Jack hadn't done. The figure's eyes were empty, black voids, and its mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. The laughter grew even louder, echoing through the room. Jack didn't think anymore. He just ran. He sprinted back through the hallway, barely noticing the posters as they seemed to change, the images shifting into something more sinister. He burst through the first door, slamming it behind him. His chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath. When he finally dared to look back, the door was gone. Jack blinked. He ran his hands along the wall, searching for any sign of it, but there was nothing. Just a solid brick wall, like the door had never existed. The diner was silent. The kitchen looked the same as before. The only difference was the chill that still clung to Jack's skin and the echo of laughter that still rang in his ears. The next day, Jack asked Manny, the diner's owner, about the back of the kitchen. He casually mentioned if there had ever been another room there. Manny frowned, looking genuinely confused. "Nope," he said. "Been the same since I bought the place 20 years ago." "Why?" Jack shook his head. "No reason." He never told anyone what he had seen that night. But sometimes, when he worked the night shift alone, he swore he could still hear it. That strange, distant laughter. The missing kid incident. It was a busy Saturday afternoon at Playland Fun Center. Families crowded the arcade. Kids ran around the play area, and parents sat at tables chatting or watching their little ones. The bright lights flashed. The sounds of laughter and arcade games filled the air, and everything seemed normal until it wasn't. At around 3 o'clock, a 6-year-old boy named Tommy went missing. His mother, Sarah, had been sitting at a nearby table, keeping an eye on him while he played. One moment, he was climbing up the colorful tunnels and crawling through the giant play structure. The next moment, he was gone. At first, Sarah wasn't too worried. She thought Tommy might have just gone deeper into the tunnels or was hiding in the ball pit. But after calling his name several times with no response, she began to feel uneasy. She got up and started looking for him, weaving through the maze of tubes and slides, calling out, "Tommy, where are you?" Minutes passed, and Tommy was nowhere to be found. Panic started to set in. Sarah rushed to the front desk and told the staff that her son was missing. The employees quickly took action. One of them grabbed a microphone and made an announcement over the speakers. "Attention, guests. We are looking for a 6-year-old boy named Tommy. He has brown hair and is wearing a red t-shirt with blue jeans. If you see him, please notify a staff member immediately." Meanwhile, the security team checked the cameras. They rewound the footage to the last time Tommy was seen. The video showed him climbing into the play structure as usual. Then, suddenly, the screen glitched. Static filled the monitor for a few seconds. When the video returned to normal, Tommy was gone. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. The employees searched every inch of the play area. They checked the ball pit, the tunnels, the slides, and even behind the arcade machines. Parents and other kids joined in the search, calling out Tommy's name. But there was no sign of him. Hours passed. The police were called, and officers arrived to help with the search. They questioned Sarah, asking if Tommy had ever wandered off before. She shook her head. "Never," she said, her voice trembling. "He wouldn't just run away." The security team continued reviewing the footage, trying to figure out what had happened. Every time Tommy was in view, The cameras glitched, showing only static. It made no sense. Then, at around 7 o'clock, an employee heard soft crying coming from the back of the play center. Following the sound, they found Tommy curled up inside a supply closet. His face was red, and his eyes were filled with tears. The staff member quickly called for help. Sarah rushed to the scene and scooped Tommy into her arms, holding him tightly. "Where were you? What happened?" she asked, relief and worry mixed in her voice. But Tommy wouldn't answer. He just buried his face in his mother's shoulder and shook his head. No matter how many times they asked, he refused to say who put him in the closet or how he got there. The police checked the supply closet, but there were no signs of forced entry. The door wasn't locked, and nothing inside seemed out of place. It was a mystery. How did Tommy get there? Why didn't he come out on his own? And why did the cameras glitch every time he was on screen? The play center staff, the police, and Tommy's mother all wanted answers, but Tommy wasn't talking. As time went on, the incident remained unsolved. Tommy never spoke about that day, no matter how many times people asked. The Playland Fun Center eventually upgraded its security system, but no one ever figured out what really happened to Tommy during those missing hours. Some say it was just a strange accident. Others believe something, or someone was in the play center that day, watching, waiting, and making sure Tommy's story stayed a secret forever. The midnight show. It was a cold Friday night, and the streets were empty. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on the pavement. A group of 5 teenagers, Jake, Lisa, Mark, Sarah, and Tom, stood outside an old Chuck E. Cheese restaurant. The place had been closed for years, but the building still stood, dark and quiet. "Are you sure about this?" Lisa asked, hugging her jacket tightly around her. "Come on, Lisa. We talked about this," Mark said with a grin. "It's just an old arcade. Well, go in, look around, and leave. No big deal." Jake, the leader of the group, nodded. "Exactly. It's just for fun. We sneak in, check out the animatronics, maybe take some pictures, and we're out." Sarah shivered but smiled. "All right, let's do it." Tom, the quiet one, looked nervous but followed the group as they made their way to the back door. Jake pulled out a crowbar he had taken from his dad's garage. He wedged it into the door frame and pried the door open with a loud creak. They stepped inside. The air was stale, filled with a scent of dust and old pizza. The arcade machines stood silent, their screens covered in grime. The tables and chairs were scattered, some overturned as if the place had been abandoned in a hurry. Lisa turned on her flashlight. The beam of light moved across the room, revealing the old animatronics on stage. Chuck E. Cheese, Helen Henny, Mr. Munch, Jasper T., Jowls, and Pasquale stood frozen, their plastic eyes staring into the darkness. "This is so creepy," Sarah whispered. Mark laughed. "They're just old machines. They don't work anymore." But as he said that, there was a faint explosion. The stage lights flickered, and a distorted voice crackled through the speakers. "Welcome to the show." The teenagers froze. Did you hear that?" Tom stammered. Jake turned around. "It's probably just an old recording. Maybe the power is still connected." But then, the animatronics moved. Chuck's head jerked to the side. His mouth opened and closed as if trying to speak. Helen's arm twitched, and her eyes flickered. Mr. Munch let out a low, garbled laugh. Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. "This isn't normal." The lights in the restaurant flickered wildly. The music, slow and broken, played from the speakers. The animatronics' movements became more erratic. "We need to go," Sarah said, backing away. "Wait," Mark said. "Let's just see what happens." Before anyone could argue, the animatronics all turned their heads toward the teenagers. Their glowing eyes locked onto them. Then they stepped off the stage. Lisa screamed. "Run!" Jake shouted. The group bolted toward the entrance, but the door they came through slammed shut. They ran through the dining area, dodging tables and chairs as the animatronics moved closer. Tom pointed toward the kitchen. "This way." They ran inside and slammed the door behind them. The kitchen was dark, the air thick with dust and mold. The sound of metal footsteps echoed outside the door. "What the hell is going on?" Mark whispered. "No idea," Jake said. "But we need to find another way out." Sarah grabbed Lisa's hand. "We'll be okay, right?" Jake looked around. "There should be an emergency exit in the storage room." "Let's go." They moved through the kitchen, stepping over fallen pots and broken plates. The air felt heavy, like something was watching them. As they reached the storage room, Tom suddenly stopped. "Wait," he whispered. "Do you hear that?" Everyone held their breath. A soft, wheezing sound came from the corner of the room. Jake slowly aimed his flashlight in that direction. A dark figure stood there. It was tall, its shape barely visible in the shadows. Its eyes glowed a faint red. The figure swayed slightly, as if it were breathing. Tom gasped. "What is that?" The figure took a slow step forward. The light flickered, and for a brief moment, they saw its face. It wasn't a person. It wasn't an animatronic. It was something else. Something wrong. It had long, thin arms and fingers that curled unnaturally. Its mouth stretched into an eerie grin, and its hollow eyes seemed to stare into their souls. Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. "We need to go." The figure lunged. Jake pushed Lisa forward. "Run!" They sprinted toward the emergency exit. The figure's footsteps were silent, but they could feel it following them. Its presence pressed down on them, making it harder to breathe. Jake reached the door and shoved it open. Cold air rushed in. They ran outside, not stopping until they reached the street. They turned back, expecting to see the figure standing in the doorway. But there was nothing. The building was dark and silent once again. Tom gasped for breath. Did that really happen?" Sarah clutched her chest. "It wasn't just the animatronics. That thing, it was real," Jake said. "And it saw us." Lisa shuddered. "Let's never come back here again." The group nodded in agreement. They walked away, their hearts still racing. The night air felt colder now. As they disappeared down the street, the lights inside the Chuck E. Cheese flickered one last time. And from the darkness, something watched them leave. The Whispering Tunnels. A mysterious playground tale at first glance. The playground behind Sunnyvale Mall looks like any other. It has bright red slides, monkey bars, a towering jungle gym, and the most popular attraction, the tunnels. These tunnels are a winding maze where children crawl through, giggling and playing hide and seek. But something is strange about this playground. Employees working nearby have told eerie stories. They say whispers come from the tunnels when no one is inside. Some even claim to hear their own names being called. Strange sounds in the night. The first time Sam, a night security guard, heard the whispers, he thought he was imagining things. It was a quiet Tuesday night. The mall had closed, and only a few employees were left. As he walked past the playground, he heard soft voices coming from the tunnels. Sam, Sam, the voice whispered. He turned around quickly. His flashlight beamed over the empty slides, the swings swaying slightly in the night breeze. The tunnels were still. Maybe it was the wind, he thought. But as he walked away, he heard it again. Sam, come play. A chill ran down his spine. He rushed back inside the mall, refusing to check the tunnels that night. The shifting ball pit, the ball pit next to the tunnels, is another mystery. Employees say that, no matter how they leave it at night, it always looks different in the morning. Balls move, forming strange patterns or empty spaces as if something had been there. Some workers even claim they have seen the balls shift on their own, as if an invisible child is playing inside. One employee, Rachel, decided to test this. She set up a small camera pointing at the ball pit before closing. When she checked the footage the next day, the recording showed something unsettling. Around midnight, the balls began to stir, slowly at first, then moving more wildly, as if something unseen was shifting underneath. But there was no one there. More than just the wind, some skeptics say the sounds and movements are just the wind, animals, or even the building settling. But others believe there is something more, something unseen that lingers in the tunnels. Employees started sharing their experiences, and the stories were eerily similar. Tom, a janitor, once heard laughter coming from the tunnels late at night. He thought maybe a child had stayed behind after closing. When he checked, there was no one. The laughter stopped the moment he stepped inside. Another worker, Lisa, reported feeling a cold hand touch her shoulder while she was cleaning the play area. She turned around, but no one was there. After that night, she refused to work near the playground alone. The legends behind the playground rumors began to spread. Some say a child went missing in the tunnels years ago, and their spirit remains, searching for playmates. Others believe the land where the mall was built had a tragic past. A few employees tried to research the history, but no official records mentioned anything unusual. Still, the whispers continue. One former employee, Mark, decided to investigate. He stayed overnight with a voice recorder and a camera. At first, everything was quiet, but at exactly 3 o'clock, his recorder picked up a soft voice. "Help me." Mark left his job the next day and never came back. The unexplained continues to this day. New employees report the same eerie experiences. The tunnels whisper, the ball pit shifts, and the feeling of being watched lingers. Some workers brush it off, others quit, and a few brave souls continue to investigate. But one thing is certain, the whispering tunnels remain one of the mall's greatest mysteries. If you ever visit Sunnyvale Mall and hear your name in the wind, be careful. You might not be alone.